Go to the hold screen. Okay, and if y'all wouldn't mind navigating to
a long time living in San Francisco to not be there anymore and have more space.
All right, guys. Well, we're live. What's going on? Welcome to Bitcoin Magazine Happy Hour here.
Yeah.
How's it going?
And Flip, thank you so much for holding the ground down over in the studio. Guys, we have an action-packed week. We have an action-packed list of topics to talk about, and we have an awesome crew of fantastic panelists to talk about it with. My name is CK. I am the host. I'm joined by two co-hosts and five awesome panelists. I'm going to pass it off to Flip in the studio. He can introduce himself, then Bran, and then we'll get into introducing these awesome panelists. Flip, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am Flip. I am the webmaster at Bitcoin Mag. So yeah, I'm Flip. Sorry about that. We dipped out for just 1 second. Technical difficulties. I'm the webmaster at Bitcoin Magazine. I write some content every once in a while and also work on other products like our conference and earncarrot.com. You can also find me on the Twitch stream, which is a lot of fun. We play marbles. We give away sats. It's fun. I love it.
All right, let's go over to Bran, who is actually a co-organizer and one of the leads at the Bitcoin 2021 conference.
Yeah, hey guys, how's it going? You got me not in the studio. Flip is, as always, the glue that is holding us together. I was supposed to be there, but surprise, surprise, in Nashville, there's freezing rain and I can't get out of my house right now. So here I am. Hope the acoustics sound okay, and I am pumped to get this show rolling. Let's intro everyone else.
Let's jump over to NLW, the last to join us. And I saw you rolling your eyes about the weather. How's it going over down there in upstate New York, NLW?
Though, listen, the weather's fine. Snow is beautiful if you don't have to go anywhere. It's just when you have to leave the house for any reason that it gets painful. But it's gorgeous over here right now.
Cool. What a crazy week. I'm excited to chat about it with you. You are always breaking it down over on the Breakdown podcast at CoinDesk. So I'm sure you have a lot of fantastic insights. Let's jump over to Kenetra, the cash flow queen. Welcome to your first appearance on Bitcoin Magazine.
All right. Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm coming to you from the beautiful Caribbean, and the weather's very nice here. I don't have any complaints. What else did you want me to say, or am I just introducing myself?
Yeah, just introduce yourself.
Okay, yeah. Kenetra Alam. I go by Cashflow Queen online. Been in the Bitcoin rabbit hole since about 2013. Love everything you're doing over there with Bitcoin Magazine, and thanks for having me on the show.
All right, let's jump over to Cedric Youngelman. Cedric is the host of the Bitcoin Matrix podcast, one of my favorites, especially of the up and coming podcast in the space. Ced, what's up? Welcome to the show.
Hey, yo, what's up? It's great to be here. My name's Ced Youngelman, CK. Thanks for that nice introduction. I'm just psyched to get into it with all you guys. I got some of my favorite Bitcoiners here, and it's not often I get to talk Bitcoin in person with people. So this is pretty dope. I'm in sunny Florida visiting my folks. So I got a nice little lake behind me, and it's 80 degrees right now. So things are looking up.
Let's go. Everything is better down south, I guess. All right, let's jump over to you, Stephen. How's it going?
Hey, what's up, CK? Good to be here. Good to be able to chat with everybody. I'm coming to you from Arizona. Recently moved here I was part of the California exodus, so made it to Arizona safely. 70 degrees and sunny, not bad this time of year. Bitcoiner first and foremost, avid consumer of Bitcoin magazine content, and have started meetup groups. So when I was in Southern California, launched the Orange County Bitcoin Network with Brian Harrington and a few other good Bitcoiners out there. And we are now launching the AZ Bitcoin Network out here. So if anyone is around the Phoenix area, first event is going to be next week. Find us on meetup.com. And investing in Bitcoin startups has been the big focus of the last couple of years for me. So pre-seed, seed stage type of people building on Bitcoin, all about it.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show. And then last but not least, what is up, Surfer Jim? Always excited to talk to you. This man has a ton of signal. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for that. I appreciate it. Since we're all talking about weather, I'm in New York, downstate New York, Long Island. We got a bunch of snow everywhere. Yesterday, I came from snowy Colorado, where I spent the week with a whole bunch of very cool Bitcoiners. So I'm in the cold. Don't love the cold. I prefer to be surfing in the warm weather. But what are you going to do? I'm involved in Bitcoin just about 4 years now. I've been a general contractor for over 30 years, running my own business. And when I started it, it was very clear to me that I had to build a lot of trust with my customers. And when I heard about Bitcoin and recognized the nature of Bitcoin and how you can not necessarily have to trust other people, in this case, we trust mathematics, it was very fascinating to me. And it turned my life around, literally, because I learned about money for the first time in my life after going through decades pretty much clueless about how it all worked. But now my eyes are opened, and I'm so excited to just talk about Bitcoin whenever I get a chance. So this is like right up my alley to be hanging with all you folks. So thank you.
All right. Well, again, excited to get your wisdom on this show. And first and foremost, I guess, cheers to the crew. I don't know for those of you who are actually familiar with what's going on the east side of the planet, but it is Chinese New Year, and this upcoming year in the Chinese New Year calendar is the year of the ox, or the year of the bull. So I think it is a very fitting year for Bitcoin, because we're all feeling quite bullish with what has been happening. And kind of on that tip, we're starting to see every freaking celebrity in the world jumping into Bitcoin, jumping into crypto, shitcoin, DeFi, NFTs, everything you name it is kind of on the table. What's everyone thinking here with kind of the hysteria that is about to kind of commence?
In Elon we trust.
In Elon we trust. I guess.
I'm glad that the Elon Doge phase seems to be subsiding.
Are you sure?
Said he just tweeted about it.
I hope so.
He's been tweeting about it. I think you're wrong. All right.
I saw there was a maximalist type of tweet from him earlier today. I was optimistic.
Maybe it's a sober Elon. In sober Elon we trust.
Sober Elon we trust. So I asked CK about this on the last show, and I said, is it good, right? I understand why people have such a negative reaction to that, right? You got a trusted person like Elon shilling not Bitcoin, and specifically a meme coin, specifically a complete joke, right? And I think that Elon feels comfortable because he loves memes and he likes to be funny, but there's a lot of Bitcoiners who are up in arms. I'm curious, like, are you one of the people who are up in arms, or are you one of the people who said, you know what, it's a joke? Like, we can do it.
It's irrelevant. I don't trust Elon, and I'm glad I don't have to. I trust Bitcoin. And Elon, it might be a shot in the world, or shot around the world for companies, but Elon's a drop in the bucket. In fact, he just bent the knee. He had to bend the knee to Bitcoin. He made more in the last month with Bitcoin than he did in 14 years selling cars. So, I think it's a flash in the pan. It lasted like 12 hours for me. I was so pumped. And now I'm ready for the next one. Who's next? Amazon, Apple, Google. We're gonna leave Elon in the dust, and who cares? Maybe he sells in 2 months. It's not important in the grand scheme of things. You know, as we go through time, this will become a blip. You know, he'll be one of many to bend their knee to Bitcoin. Pierre said it. 250 companies in the S&P 500 will have Bitcoin on their balance sheet by the end of this year. Tesla's just number 2. You know, and if he's
number
half
1,
right,
they're actually the first
MicroStrategy,
one in the S&P 500.
Square.
I think
They're not in the S&P
MicroStrategy.
500.
Square dipped their toe in the water.
Oh yeah,
And
is
Square.
Square part of S&P 500?
Oh, are they? What's their market
I think
cap?
Tesla's the only one that's in the S&P 500.
Tesla's the only one. I'm guessing 10% by the end of the year, though. I think Pierre is pretty bullish, but I do think that's realistic. We see 50, and I've got a list that I'm working on that I'm going to start naming those 50 people, because I think we could all sit there and come up with 50 CFOs that we can start hitting up right now and make this impact in the next 12 months, realistically.
Most of you guys heard Michael Saylor interview Ross Stephan, I would assume. And if you didn't happen to catch what he said, they're currently managing $6 billion worth of Bitcoin. He expects it to be 25 billion by the end of the year. He says they have the ability to onboard 75 corporations a month, something like that. They've been working on this. He said that I can't think of the name of his organization, but they've been
NYDIG.
Thank you. Since 2017 or even before that, and way before that, as a matter of fact. I think he's been involved for much longer. But nobody would listen. He described it bamboo. They were building the root structure for years, building his company, setting it all up. And now they're ready to onboard everyone. And there's a lot of money on the sideline. Yeah, I don't know that Pierre's bullish enough, maybe. You never know. Could be more than that many S&P 500 companies. You never know.
That conversation between Michael Saylor and Ross Stevens, I wasn't even familiar with Ross Stevens before that conversation.
No, neither was I.
And that conversation was fantastic. In all the years I've been in Bitcoin, I think that might be my favorite. It's definitely the one that I'm like, it rose to the top of the list in terms of what I send new people to just quickly digest why this stuff is huge.
You know, it was one of the most profound things he said, which we all already do, is a switch flipped and he began to think in Bitcoin, and he analogized it to thinking in a different language. When you finally get the new language, you don't think in translating your native language, you just think in the new language. We all think in Bitcoin now, and so does he. And his whole perspective is so spot on to all the things we talk about, all the Austrian economic stuff and whatnot. I know, Nathaniel, you reviewed that whole seminar he did, if I'm not mistaken, correct? And you must have tons of insight on this. I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, I did. So I read his annual letter for one of my long read Sundays, but I also actually did the first, and so far, he's only one of 2 interviews with Robbie Gutman, who's his co-founder at Stone Ridge and the CEO of NYDIG. So Ross is the co-founder of NYDIG and the CEO of Stone Ridge, which is the larger company. And both of those guys are extremely sharp. They're extremely mission driven. They're actually kind of motivated by what it looks like to shift the financial power system in the world. And I think that comes out in a lot of different ways. The way that Ross in particular thinks about energy and kind of relocating civilization around the sources of energy rather than having to bring energy to civilization is a pretty profound concept that he explores, but it's just one of many. Listen, I think those guys started messing around. They got interested in Bitcoin long before they were doing anything formally with Bitcoin. And they wanted to play at a level where the custody and all these sort of challenges were pretty significant. And so they started building out tools, and just by nature, they talked to their clients, the people who were kind of working on, working with them in other capacities and other parts of their fund, and they all wanted in. And that was the genesis of NYDIG. It was basically kind of built for them as the first set of clients, distributed to a small handful of people who were kind of around their alternative asset allocations and the stuff they did at Stone Ridge, and then matured in a huge way over the last few years into something that is just kind of quietly become one of the bigger institutional partners in this space. I also think that if you're kind of watching what they're doing now, they just acquired digital assets data. They're clearly playing for the future in which all of these big financial institutions are competing to be the service providers and partners for banks that want to get in this space, right? BNY Mellon announced today that they're getting into the custody game. They're a $41 trillion asset custodian, the biggest in the world. And someone asked, like, who are you partnering with to make all that happen? They're like, well, we're obviously partnering with someone. You're not going to just build that on your own in a few months. But they didn't give any more details. I have no idea if that's NYDIG or Jet. I mean, there's a lot of different partners who are playing in that space. But there is going to be a just absolute groundswell, especially as these super traditional institutions, the JP Morgan, Citi, BNY Mellons are now off the leash to start offering Bitcoin and crypto custody and other types of services to their people. There's going to be just a huge amount of that flooding in. So it's pretty interesting to see. I think what so many people responded to with NYDIG is kind of how sincere they are and the perspective they come from, and that's certainly been my experience with them too. But I mean, the thing that's cool is that, like, if you look at the crop of people who are out there evangelizing this for this set of institutions, it's so much more legit. Like the general legitimacy of who's out evangelizing over the last 2-3 years is so significantly different than what it was a few years ago. And even it's still, we're at the beginning of kind of the celebrity cycle side of things. But like, if you go back to, 2017, 2018, celebrities came in, but it was this sort of atrocious, build my own named coin type of thing, right? And
still happening.
It is, but it's so much less, right? Like, where celebrities are getting the points is for Bitcoin. And I think NFTs are very different to me as it relates to celebrities, artists, musicians specifically, because it's such an obvious thing for them to experiment with. It's a new creative medium. It makes sense. Like,
the cash flow queen, I see you reacting to Soulja Boy. I also just want to get your take on what's been happening the past couple of weeks, because I mean, it's been insane that the fact that the MasterCard news today was like under the rug news. No one really gave a ish about it, even though it's pretty substantial.
Yeah, it is very, very substantial. I think that we are getting accustomed to having so much great news in the space. And you say, MasterCard, yeah, okay, who's next, right? That we don't really celebrate it like we would maybe years ago. The thing with Soulja Boy, the thing that you saw on my face was that I follow him on Twitter, and I stopped following him actually, but he was shilling these coins or whatnot, and I'm like, dude, like, you just said everything that you bought, and you didn't mention Bitcoin. So I'm like, I know that you have to have people around you that have some type of financial sense, and we know that Bitcoin is the fastest horse in the race. So that's what you saw. CK was just like whatever with him. But yeah, the news that's coming out, this week in particular, back to Elon. I like the fact that they decided to allocate some capital towards Bitcoin. But as far as I think it was, I'm not sure. I think it was Cedric that was saying, it's like, who's next? Elon, when Elon starts to talk like Michael Saylor, I will take him serious. But as far as, me just being gung-ho, I like the fact that, they allocated capital, but I don't know how to take Elon. I don't really know how to take him. But again, it's good for the space. It's good for the asset. And I think I like the sober Elon versus maybe the not so sober Elon.
Morning, Elon. So, I literally loved every single thing you said. There is a decent amount of feedback coming from your audio setup, so I don't know if the mic is making it worse. Maybe you should go back to just the headphones. But fantastic take. Who wants to build on that?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in. Marrying kind of what you just said, also to what Seth was saying. It seems like a lot of these people who, are well known outside of Bitcoin jump into Bitcoin. Really, they're like doing their, job to give it the push that they can kind of give it, like to help Bitcoin forward. And then eventually they'll just be grabbing on and holding on, with the rest of us as Bitcoin pulls everyone forward. I'm curious if you guys, I feel like there's a dichotomy going on. where there are some people who are jumping into Bitcoin right now and like wanting to help move it forward. And there's some people who are jumping into Bitcoin right now, wanting it to move them forward. And, like there's nothing to like, throw any shade on anyone doing that. But I do think it's funny how like, it's both things are happening at the same time. And both I think are indicators of kind of different phenomena going on with Bitcoin. I don't know if you guys had any takes on that.
I got a quick take. I think that most people get in to have Bitcoin move them forward. And then once they see how important it is, they want to help Bitcoin move forward, because that's exactly where I am.
I agree.
I'm here because I want people to hear us talk about it and understand and get some truth. The people on this call all know how Bitcoin works and what it means and how it fits into the ecosystem. And we just want as many people as possible to get that.
I agree with that. I also think it's really cool how Michael Saylor has come out as such an advocate for all of this and really seems to, not just want to benefit from Bitcoin, but move Bitcoin forward. So I agree with the sentiment that, Bitcoin does not need any particular individual or even company, right? Like every person, every company is going to need Bitcoin more than Bitcoin is going to need them. However, Bitcoin can certainly benefit from, the energy of capable individuals. And the way that Michael Saylor's really come out, I think, has accelerated this more quickly. I didn't think we'd be quite this far in the corporate adoption phase of Bitcoin as we are right now. I thought this was like year and a half, another 2 years out. And so I'm stoked. And, we in the Bitcoin community have a very good immune system or almost defense mechanism that we've built up over the years, right? Of seeing some individuals who benefited from Bitcoin, maybe turning their back on it, backstabbing it, whatever. So we've kind of got used to not having heroes, not putting people up on pedestals. And that's healthy. That's important. But to the extent that these people do really move Bitcoin forward, it's amazing. And I think, Michael Saylor and all these others who are starting to come in like Elon, I'm happy about it.
I mean, just, if you get excited about it, institutional and banks and all this other stuff, just wait till you find out the energy people actually understand Bitcoin, right? That's when this becomes extremely interesting, right? When your oil and your gas people actually wake up to, oh, I've got this remnant energy here, right? Or they can actually go and source primary energy sources for this and make some decent money and continue to have significant amount of control in the global economy. They're going to get really, really pumped. And we're basically barely seeing that. It's like a bunch of guys. I mean, you've seen inside of these, the flare off energy, boxes that are sitting there, right? Like it's a tin shack with miners held up with, pre-made cables that are kind of strung all over the place. We still got a while to go, right? Like before this gets to the big times. That's going to be what's interesting for me.
I don't want to go back to the, who's moving Bitcoin forward or whether Bitcoin moves you forward. I really have a hard time putting anyone on a pedestal. I feel like we kill all our heroes eventually anyway. And I'm hesitant to put anyone up there. And I think about someone like Michael Saylor. I think it's a little strange that, after running a company for 20, 30 years, that he has the capacity and bandwidth to completely change on a dime to Bitcoin. But when you talk about like him moving Bitcoin forward, he's made 20 years of free cash flows in like 6 months. So Bitcoin has moved him forward more than he's done anything for Bitcoin. And I really think because Bitcoin is a new language. So if you understand this language, you start calculating in this language. Money is just for economic calculations. And he made cold, hard calculations that he could become wealthier and move past other people on the list if he goes hard at Bitcoin. And it's the same thing Elon did. They just made a calculation. That's what Bitcoin does.
Can I throw this in here too?
Yeah, sure.
I don't mean to interrupt you. You're totally right. And I would argue that Elon has shown that he is willing to make those calculations. He is willing to go beyond the status quo and make gutsy calls. And I'm not shocked that he's leading the first Fortune 500 company, S&P 500 company that bought Bitcoin. Like he exposed the S&P 500 to Bitcoin. I'm not shocked. And I'm not shocked that Tesla is one of the most valuable companies in the world because of those balls, because of that ability to make those calls. Back to you, Sid.
Elon's an enigma. I don't know if he's P.T. Barnum or Stephen Jobs. I have no idea. I've never met the man. He's a heck of a salesman and a marketer, but he hasn't made a lot of money. And, I haven't verified his background. I've heard stories, and maybe he didn't get an engineering degree. Maybe he bought the technology from another company like, Bill Gates was able to get some stuff from Xerox. I just think that, again, there were really smart people around him that maybe pushed him towards this. You would think with his background at PayPal that he would have came around faster, that he would have been more of, an evangelist earlier. And then all the games he's played recently, I don't know where his legal department or HR is, but like, I don't trust him for anything. He's steering people in the wrong direction while he's claiming a piece of the pie. So that's why I just want to move on from him. I think it's great that it's very notable. He's the richest man in the world, and it's shocking to people who don't understand this language. But he just made a bet like anyone else, and he's not doing anything. I think
Elon got there, like with SpaceX. He actually learned rocketry. I mean, he puts his money where his mouth is.
I'm not doubting it, but that's the whole point of Bitcoin is I don't have to rely on a CEO. I don't have to rely on a business plan. I don't have to take on business risk. I don't know what kind of wealth he's going to generate with SpaceX. But my point is that he's generated more wealth with Bitcoin than he has with those entities for himself and others. In some regards, we could talk about the shitcoin waterfall of private venture, venture capital, and who's made money along the way with Tesla and SpaceX. But most of retail hasn't, to the extent that maybe his partners have. But I think he's been shady with the whole Bitcoin thing, from his entrance into it to his announcement of it to playing games with people. And that's the thing. I mean, we could all just go home and stack sats and get wealthier maybe if this thing goes where we think it is. But we're here to help other people come to some sort of truth and conclusion, and he's done nothing for that. You give him, he punted. He's in Bitcoins. It brought it to a lot of people, but he didn't serve it up in a way that was truthful or altruistic in any way, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I think one interesting thing.
He wasn't straight up.
I think one interesting thing.
Let's
that
go,
this
Stephen,
then
Kenetra.
Yeah, one interesting thing that this kind of highlights for me, Ced, and I think what you're digging into is like, it's actually tough to differentiate between, is somebody moving Bitcoin forward or moving themselves forward? Like when you really kind of zoom way into that, the incentive structure of Bitcoin, right, is like, we believe in it so strongly because it benefits from everyone acting in their own self-interest. No one has to be altruistic. And so it actually gets really tough. Like just the act of buying Bitcoin, that does kind of move Bitcoin forward, like number go up is powerful. The price spike from when Elon bought, even if he was, I agree, doing a bunch of frustrating stuff like shilling Doge and kind of playing coy, all this stuff, not ideal, but that number go up power generated a lot of curiosity, definitely brought Bitcoin forward in some ways. So I think that's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Kenetra.
I was just going to add, hopefully my audio is better. But I was just going to add that, yeah, I concur with what Ced was saying as far as Elon. I think he did make a bet, but the beauty about Bitcoin is that we don't have to depend on any one particular person. One of the things I was thinking about this week with all the great news that's been coming out, I was thinking to myself, I said, what if this was it? What if this was where Bitcoin stopped? This was the price point, and this is where it settled. Would I personally be satisfied? And I would, because Bitcoin has proven its use case as a store of value since I got engaged. So yes, there's a lot further that we have to go, or that we're going to go. There's a lot more industries that Bitcoin will eat. But again, it doesn't depend on any one particular person. And that's the beauty of the decentralized network, and the fact that it's not I almost said Vitalik, there's not a CEO. There's not a one person. There's not a board.
There's
a
not a
network. It's a
Vitalik.
group. Yeah.
Exactly.
We need to start using that instead of CEO.
I like
Does this company have a Vitalik?
Yeah, the thing is Bitcoin Magazine was actually co-founded by Vitalik, but he left us as well. And you know, I think we can poke fun at him. It's fun, and I love that. I love that. Like, there's a clear point of centralization there, and if you have cognitive dissonance, you won't acknowledge it, but it's there.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing, guys, like where do we draw the line as far as getting people on board? You know, when I first really understood Bitcoin, I wanted to shout from the mountaintops and tell everybody, anybody that would listen. Like, it was like a new religion. I just gotten baptized. I just gotten saved. And I'm at a point now where I'm just like, yeah, you know, if you want to learn, come pay me my consulting fee and I'll teach you. But as far as me, I guess, getting so frustrated, I used to get frustrated because people wouldn't get it. You know, so I guess my question to you all is like, where do we draw the line as far as helping people to understanding it and helping them and push it forward, but then also having the discernment to say, maybe this person doesn't have the ears to listen or the ears to hear the message.
I don't think it's up to any of us on an individual level to say, you know what, I'm going to put this on my shoulders and educate the entire world, because if you do that, you'll never be able to stop. And we're shifting not just your thoughts about money, but control and power, energy, right? There's a lot of different things that we're unraveling here, and it's tiresome, right? At the end of the day, and I think you see this on Clubhouse specifically, where we're having a good chat, everything's going well. Someone gets up on stage and says, should I buy this token? Is it a good thing, right? And it completely disrupts everything, because you have to realize.
There's a great conversation so far, guys.
Sorry, we dropped out for a second. Anyways, I don't think we have to put it all on our individual back, but I do think we need to be thinking about a collective and making sure that the channels are there and working together. And that's that kind of hive mind, that immunity that Bitcoin has developed over time. And have faith that there's, you know, where there's Ced, there's also Stephen, where there's also Brand, where there's also Jim and Nathaniel and Kenetra and CK and Flip, right? And we're all here together. And you know, our narratives have changed over the years too. I think that specifically the narrative around energy and mining and how important that is to Bitcoin has gotten dramatically better over the last 2 years specifically. And so you gotta just remember not to put it all on yourself, and we'll be okay, and we'll educate everybody eventually.
Good point.
I feel like you almost have to be of two minds of that constantly. Like, there's the awareness that Bitcoin's success does not depend on individually at all. But if you focus on that too much, it's almost a little bit depressing, you know? Like there are steps that you can take to kind of move the needle and accelerate this future, but is it inevitable regardless? So it's kind of finding that happy in between, and like finding your place in doing what brings you fulfillment in bringing Bitcoin forward, even if you believe deep down that like this thing happens regardless of you.
I want to take what we're talking about now and also marry it to what we were talking about earlier. And I'm going to take like a logical leap here, and let's assume that Bitcoin ultimately becomes a global currency. That means it needs to be a store of value, then a medium of exchange, then a unit account, all that kind of stuff, right? One thing that I think is interesting is like we talk about Michael Saylor. Everyone likes Michael Saylor. We also talk about slay your idols. And like, here's this interesting thing where like, right now Bitcoin is accomplishing its store of value narrative. And Michael Saylor has been, a champion of the store of value narrative of Bitcoin. But he's actually been vocally kind of against talking about Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, which, I find interesting. I don't knock him for it, but I see that as kind of like, a narrow take of what Bitcoin could possibly do. To go back to Elon, Elon has other reasons why he might like Bitcoin. I'm curious if anyone has thought through, the fact that he has Tesla that, has certain ways that it could use Bitcoin differently from MicroStrategy. Same with, you're not going to transport fiat or gold or dollar bills on a rocket ship, but you could transport information on a rocket ship. I wonder if anyone, could Elon be this great Michael Saylor of the medium of exchange narrative of Bitcoin? I don't know. I just want to pose that to everyone.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. Oh, go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of use cases for Tesla and Bitcoin. I'd like to see a node in every car. But I think medium of exchange is a little, it's not the battle. I think the holy grail is unit of account. And that is the key to the whole language. And that's what Michael Saylor and Elon did, is they counted their money in Bitcoin and they saw that they were losing in fiat. And so the holy grail, what we're trying to convince everyone to do is count their money in Bitcoin. It's not about how much Bitcoin you have. It's about doing your calculations in Bitcoin so that not only can the individual make better calculations, but as humanity, we could all make better calculations. I think medium of exchange just comes by default because everyone's going to demand it. Once athletes get to continue to demand to get paid in Bitcoin, once music stars continue or demand to get paid in Bitcoin, we're all going to want to receive Bitcoin, and we're not going to use the other thing for payments. But we have payment technology, and I'm happy spending my fiat. And and you can do so much with Lightning, where you can just convert the fiat behind the scenes, and everyone could have what they want. I could send you fiat, you convert to Bitcoin, you send me whatever you want, I'm going to convert it to Bitcoin. But the key is unit of account, in my opinion, because that's how we gain so much across borders in terms of calculations and language. You have other things like non-censorable, and that will help people. But I think unit of account is the language we're trying to develop, or the language that now exists.
Yeah, well, so I would agree with you, said unit of account is a language. That is the ultimate goal, is we need people to think in Bitcoin, think in sats.
You're going to get wrecked if you don't.
At the same time, I was going to say, at the same time, it's a lot more more politically. It's let me talk. It's a lot more politically palatable to say Bitcoin will replace gold, Bitcoin will replace a store of value, than to say Bitcoin is replacing the dollar. From a political perspective, that is a lot more politically palatable to attack gold, because gold is already kind of down in the dumps. It's already kind of been taken down by the fiat system. So I do think that there's a lot of politics, especially when these high profile individuals are talking about Bitcoin. NLW, I want to jump back to you.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to reinforce. And I think it's on everyone individually to decide whether this is, someone acting as a necessary evil or not. But for, at least as he presents it, for Michael, censorship resistance and store of value are separable parts of Bitcoin, right? He's been very explicit of that, can't be anymore. We hate that term. We hate that censorship resistance term. Now, I would venture, having spent a little bit of time talking to him, that's probably, to your point, CK, an assessment of what is and isn't going to get Bitcoin through the next phase unscathed vis-a-vis regulators, right? If you are competing to be a different type of commodity like gold, that's part of a new financial system that's innovative and technology that we want to be a part of, is one thing. Competing against the US dollar is illegal, right? That's functionally what it comes down to. If you're someone who's bet the entirety of their company on Bitcoin, as Michael has, it doesn't matter how, you could hold the belief simultaneously that the US government could not, even if it tried, kill this thing, while also knowing that it could kill your bet on that thing. So I think this is why I actually think it's a reasonable question. So I had Ben Hunt and Alex Gladstein on the show to kind of debate this a little bit, as it related to, do these firms coming in threaten Bitcoin in any way? Does Bitcoin just become another casino game for Wall Street? And it was a really good conversation. I think that they had a lot of mutual respect and everything. But I do think that there is this, it's almost like having two separate conversations, because it's just sort of de facto, no corporation in the world, especially a Fortune 500, no publicly traded corporation, can publicly buy into the idea that this is a US dollar replacement. You know what I mean? If they're a US base, it's just not going to happen. And we have to decide, A, what that means to us in terms of how deeply we view these as allies, and B, what are the the mediums through which we kind of articulate those other parts of the story and the narrative. Because just because, look, you could have a whole corporate sector that's super bought into Bitcoin and kind of like winks and nods to us over here about the censorship resistant piece, but is still going to have our backs when it comes to making sure that regulators don't fuck with this too much. Or you could have a corporate sector that really truly does not give a shit about any of the values, that will throw them overboard as soon as it happens. And I think that as soon as you start to walk down that path, you have to ask, what other values are they willing to throw overboard, right? Like, does it become good to have a little bit more emission? Is 21 million, you know what I mean? Like, once one thing becomes compromised, it's reasonable to ask what else they'll think. So I actually think, I find one thing that I find frustrating sometimes is the dismissiveness with which Bitcoiners think that nothing can beat this protocol. And I think that the mismatch, the problem is not that they're wrong about the ultimate kind of unchallengeability of networks of people who are willing to transact with one another, and that being able to beat out all kind of institutional challenges. There's a lot of shit that happens in the space between where we are right now, which is actually this becoming a big, powerful, important, liberating force in the world. And that where it's like surviving because we're willing to keep it survive. And I'm much more interested in the big force in the world. So it's like, what's the path through which we make that happen without compromising those core values? And I think that's a really important question.
This is getting spicy. Who wants to take over? Let me just jump in really quick. And I think that you can't separate the core values from what makes Bitcoins valuable. So anything outside of that, like censorship resistance doesn't matter, unit of account doesn't matter, all the properties of money doesn't matter. That is either a smokescreen, or it is ignorance, or it's maliciousness. Those are the only three options, because guess what? 21 million is what makes number go up, and 21 million does not fucking matter unless you can validate it yourself, you can hold it yourself, and that is censorship resistant. If it doesn't have those features, 21 million doesn't matter. It all matters. All of Bitcoin features go into making it a good money.
CK, say those three again. What were they?
You need censorship resistance, you need to be able to validate it, and you need to be able to hold your keys. If you don't have all of those things together, then it doesn't matter. Like, guess what? You can't have Bitcoin on a centralized server and have 21 million at the same time, because it won't work. We already know that if it's on a centralized system where people control it, you won't get the hard cap. The only reason the hard cap matters is because it's decentralized. It's because people can hold their keys. It's because people can say, fuck you, if you're trying to change the rules. If it doesn't have those properties, if it doesn't have all of them, then guess what? It's not going to the moon. It doesn't matter. It's the same as your cuck bucks inside of the Chase ledger system inside of your app. It doesn't matter.
I'll drink to that.
What are you drinking?
Well said.
I have a big macro view on this whole thing. So I'm thinking about this invention called money and how it's propelled humanity through centuries of improvement, efficiency, happiness, right? We figured out that something called money can help us. And then we came up with a whole bunch of forms of this thing called money. And bad people co-opted those other forms of money and screwed over unknowing other people like us, you know, so we're in this fiat money system. And then Bitcoin gets invented, becomes the best form of money ever. It's got all the natural properties that money needs to have, including what CK just said, this ability to hold on to it yourself and not have it be confiscated out from under you, from out of your bank account by some guy in a black robe who writes words on paper and allows somebody to just take it from you. So we now have this, like, what I kind of consider this sort of perfect form of money. It's certainly the best one of all. So I've had these really deep thoughts about this for quite a while. I started writing about this, and the working title of what I'm writing is Bitcoin is Nature's Tuning Fork. And what I mean by that is by having the best money in the world, we can all coalesce around it. We already coalesce around money. Money is the most saleable good. It's in between every single trade. And by having one universal money, it's like, think of an orchestra, right? You're just an individual player and you want your instrument to sound good. You want to be able to fit in. You want that song to come out perfect. And the conductor hits a tuning fork and says, everybody tune to middle C, right? Let's go. And that is the coordinator. That's the middle. Everybody, the tuning fork doesn't care about anybody. Everybody's following it. So we now have the money of humanity, and everybody's going to tune into it one day. This is, it's unarguable. It's unavoidable, in my opinion. As more and more people come to realize that this is the best form of storing your productivity through time and space, that's what money's for. We're going to just organize around this thing, and it's going to pull us all forward together. And we're going to play an awesome song together as a group of humans walking around on this planet. And tying it to this conversation was started off about medium of exchange. I don't see how you can have a world currency that doesn't have the capacity to be able to be used as a medium of exchange for those people who want to use it. And we have second and even third layer solutions being developed right now that I believe one day will satisfy people's ability to move around little fractions of a Bitcoin, not necessarily on the base layer, but that will always be pegged to the Bitcoin blockchain for all that economic activity. I believe that's akin to the different orchestra players passing around the lead, from the trumpet section to the trombone section. We're just moving around the music, the well-tuned music between each other, and everybody gets the benefit by the glorious sound that comes out. I think Bitcoin's going to just fix so much crap over the next couple of generations. I wish I could see it all play out for the next 100 years, but for as long as I'm around, I'm just going to enjoy the ride. This is awesome to me.
Bitcoin fixes this. Who wants to jump? Yeah, cheers to that. Who wants to jump in on this tune? Otherwise, we have another topic to jump into.
I'll add one quick thought. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'll add one quick thought on medium of exchange. I love those analogies that you just made, Jim. I think that's awesome. And in thinking about ways that we have not been able to use money as a medium of exchange for technical reasons. And so those aren't quite as obvious, right? Because they're just like lurking there and they've not really ever been realized. It's never been possible to send a fraction of a penny around the globe instantly and trustlessly like Lightning Network enables. And so in the same way that, some of the sectors that Bitcoin was earliest adopted were like the Silk Road, because, for regulatory reasons, people kind of, the dark markets needed this uncensorable type of money. I think you'll just see these use cases that haven't been able to be achieved with technology before be the earliest and biggest opportunities for medium of exchange, because otherwise you're competing with the Visas and MasterCards and like fiat payment mechanisms that we've had. Like there's a lot of competition for go up and pay for a coffee in a coffee shop, because that's been a thing for decades. If you go into like sending sats over the wire to as you consume a podcast or some type of streaming media, then you kind of have a monopoly on that if you're the first to get there. And so that space is really interesting. I think I like to think about it in that way, in terms of like, what can't money do? And will Bitcoin and Lightning be the first to do that?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And, I feel like we haven't probably, as a marketplace yet, explored all of the different ways that, Bitcoin is superior to cash and all the kind of use cases that can open up. I know we're playing around with it with one of the projects we've got called Carrot, but there's so many ways that, you can kind of play with it. I wanted real quick to, I have like a visual, an image that I've kind of built up in my mind that I haven't said before, but Nathaniel kind of made me think about it, which is like, right now Bitcoin's like on a path, and you almost want to think of it as like, a Mario Kart, like little race car. And we got all these like speed up, power up boost kind of things where we can fit the narrative through, like we can thread the needle a little bit and not run into crazy, the narrative blows up and, regulators come in or someone tries to come in and slow it down. And so far we've done a really good job of, navigating it. And we all kind of are pulling it along, or we're controlling the car and getting it kind of on the right path. But I think eventually the speed ups or the eye of the needle, whatever it may be, will get too small. And Bitcoin's eventually just going to crash through, some sort of barrier that's going to slow it down in terms of its adoption. And so this maybe didn't make any sense, but to kind of to round it out, like, I agree with what Nathaniel said, whereas, there are certain narratives that need to be bigger right now, well, Bitcoin is small and can't really be, you know, a company doesn't want to be competing with the US dollar with Bitcoin, right? But, you know, eventually Bitcoin will compete with the US dollar, and eventually the regulators are going to, you know, see that, and it'll, you know, the inevitable will happen regardless of how much we can try and, you know, steer the ship a little bit. And I'm wondering, you know, do you see, I don't even have an answer to this, but like, do you see there being value in just, you know, friggin' wrecking the ship right now and, you know, letting it kind of miss the eye of the needle, and bringing on all the regulation now and just letting it kind of go forward?
So here's my take on that. Like, I think that, one, we don't really have control over this. This isn't actually so much about our narrative making, it's about how it's actually functioning, right? Like, this does function more like a commodity for these for the companies that are putting it on their treasury books. You know what I mean? And like, it's so good to all your points about being a store of value right now. Like, it's just people don't want to spend it, right? JP Morgan the other day wrote a report about, or Morgan Stanley actually, about the buy and hold behavior makes it very hard as a currency, which is totally fine. Like, so I want to just make sure that, like, it's not like the Council of Bitcoin Marketing is sitting down and determining that we're going to do like the narrative of digital gold. That's just that is the thing, that functionality of it, that purpose of it is attracting people to it. So the good news is, like, we're actually, it's not like we're picking our battles even so much. Like, the specific corporations and their PR departments at Saylor might be, right? In general, we're kind of not. Like, what this is and how it's functioning for people is the thing that's the less scary version of the thing. So that's part one. Part two is that a shitload can happen between now and when those fights start to become inevitable, including a lot of different ways that looking at, like, if you're America, how much you care and are stressed out about this. If you look at this as a strict interpretation of the law, right? And you're like, well, people aren't allowed to print currency and that's something that we're going to fight. That's one thing, right? But let's imagine a scenario where there's a very long period of time where this continues to emerge as this unbelievably powerful store of value. That's a savings technology that gets people to think differently, that allows for these different types of functionality and use cases in a way that coexists with a lot that's going on. Well, simultaneous to that, the power of internet communities and networks that are not organized geographically, but are instead about affinity, about kind of interest, about just whatever, they're going to get more proximately powerful to traditional geographic locations too. And in that world, if you are thinking strictly about the world in terms of power, there's going to be a lot of folks, hopefully, who come into positions of power in the US government who are not thinking about trying to roll back the power of the internet as a whole because it threatens the geographical power and the traditional power of the US, but say, how does the US's traditional types of power and what we want going forward coexist with or co-opt some part of, or are, can be copacetic with these new types of kind of internet fealties, right? And right now it's very tense, right? The reason that Libra was such a fucking starting gun for everyone to be stressed out in governments around the world is that a network of all of us who kind of are self-organized around an anonymous founder who hasn't poked their head out of the clouds for a very long time and who seems not to be there anymore is way less scary than a 3 billion person fealty run by Mark Zuckerberg, who you don't trust to start, right? And so we're in this weird tense place vis-a-vis big tech and all these sort of things, but like that's going to be the dominant kind of battle or struggle, power struggle over the next 20, 30 years. It's totally possible that as this starts to happen in whatever the interval is, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, the US there's sophisticated people who are like, what's the right way to be the dominant power in meat space? Because that's the place that we're relegated to. And I think that, like, if you look at, for example, so India is fast tracking a law to try to ban crypto and start their own digital currency. And if you look at the piece that Balaji wrote, basically about why India should go the exact opposite direction. And it's all about geopolitics, right? It's all about realpolitik and power and understanding the place of India in the world and what India is going to be for the next generation. And it's unlikely, it strikes me, to work for whatever set of reasons the the administration that's been in power in India for the last set of years is very hostile. This is a thing that is terrifying to them, and it feels like this is going to get pressed forward. But there are a lot of places where that might not be the case, right? Like if you have to kind of examine each of these, like we can't talk about nations monolithically as it relates to adoption and how they're going to be scared with Bitcoin, right? The US is in a very particular place because the global financial system has been organized around a dollar standard for a very long time. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't a lot of people in the US who see a different evolution of that system being the right way for it to evolve, to persist and keep US power, right? But that's the context that they come from. China is a challenger nation who believes that they're just a couple thousand years delayed on their rightful place at the very epicenter of the world, and they need to get around SWIFT. They need to get around the existing rails to become the powerful nation that they want. That's why they are relatively interested. They're interested in co-opting this technology for their own purposes because they believe they can use it vis-a-vis their network of vassal and satellite states and the Belt and Road Initiative to get to build an alternative network, not to Bitcoin, to the US-led SWIFT system, right? To the US-led kind of dollar system. So that's a whole different thing. And then you have all these other countries around the world who are like, well, where the fuck do we fit in this, right? Nigeria right now. So the Central Bank of Nigeria last Friday reaffirmed guidance that it had on the book since 2017. It's like, yo, literally, do you guys not remember when in January 2017, we told you that you were not allowed to work with crypto companies? Stop working with crypto accounts and crypto companies. And everyone's like, whoa, this is kind of like a big deal now, and it's an important thing. And there's all sorts of potential political dimensions there. But if you go look, there were tweets going out today and transcripts coming from the Nigerian Senate. Like, this is a big, interesting conversation that they're having now. They're like, yo, before we cut ourselves off, to despite our face, like, what is the possibility that this is a set of tools that actually allow our youth to have a different type of future? What would it look like to be a leader in this? Are there totally different ways to look at this? And they actually went and tasked their financial division with really digging into this and coming back in 2 weeks. And who knows if they'll want to come back in 2 weeks. So basically the central bank got tough again, or really in their minds, they just said what they'd said before. And the Senate in that country was like, whoa, hold up. Let's maybe actually go deeper on this because it might be more complex and there might be some very different angles through which to look at this. So I guess my point is I introduced the set of terms, so it's on me, but it's not as simple as our government's going to shut this down. And that this is, I think, the most common, it's the best contender for the wall of worry of this bull cycle right now, right? The most number of people who are kind of trying to sound smart, saying why you shouldn't be interested in Bitcoin right now are grokking with this. Well, if it gets as powerful as you say it's eventually going to be shut down. And I think we would do well to really understand the different contexts of different governments and different types of governments and different types of places that it's coming into, how it might fit in that, and kind of have that perspective on it. So I guess going back to your original question, should we rip the Band-Aid off now? One, I don't think we can. It's just kind of like, it's not like we're competing yet. We're competing in our minds and our hearts and in our ability to see the future. And there's going to be plenty of people who are kind of on an individual level. Yes, they are replacing the US dollar with Bitcoin for things that they want to do. Vendors for Twitter, right? Like the CFO was on TV talking about that. But it's almost like we don't have to control that. We don't have to have that fight yet because it's not where it is. It's going to happen in lots of different places in lots of different ways. And I don't know. I think there's way more potential that internet, or that Bitcoin as the internet's native money gets to be part of a larger conversation about just how do meat space administrations and power systems work in the context of an internet that's ultimately more powerful.
There's no way that they can catch up. I mean, it's as simple as that. There is no such thing as ripping a Band-Aid, right? That would mean we have to stop what we're doing, stop all the progress, tell everybody, hold up, stop trading, right? So that we can go and legislate or regulate or pull whatever this Band-Aid is that you're talking about. Facebook has for years been ahead of this curve. They've been like, oh, well, maybe we should do something about it. They still haven't done anything about it, right? They're not going to be able to. The internet is here. This is not a Bitcoin problem. This is the internet problem, right? Information flies at the speed of light, at the speed of bits, right? They can't stop any of this thing. So everything is out of control. That is the Band-Aid to be ripped, if anything. It's just the invention of the internet.
I agree. And I think it's so fascinating to see the realization and the shift in thinking where they go from, okay, let's either ban this thing or in most cases, let's kind of ignore this thing, to what Nigeria seems to be waking up to now, based on their regulatory discussions and transcripts of, is it dangerous for us to ignore this thing? Like that to see that happen at the regulatory level and sort of the nation state level, that's wild and cool.
They're just saying stuff that you can't say out loud. That's all it is. They're all thinking it. They're all going, wait a minute. And they have been, again, for the past 20-something years, they've been sitting here going, shit. We don't control the narrative anymore. Right? What do we do to fix this? Let's point a gun at their heads. Will that work? And they're like, oh, I guess that didn't work. Well, maybe we'll try not to kill everybody, right? Maybe we won't threaten violence against everybody.
Well, I mean, I was gonna say that's that's the ultimatum that Bitcoin kind of pushes against regulators is: are you going to point guns at your citizens, or are you going to embrace this thing? That is the ultimate, that is the ultimate kind of proposition that's on the table. And honestly, it's so easy to embrace Bitcoin. Bitcoin aligns incentives. This is why Bitcoin is so powerful. Never before has there been a sly, roundabout way that makes even the regulators like, wait, we would get rich as fuck if we started embracing this thing. Like, never before has the incentive of selfishness been so well aligned. And I mean, they could fight it, but it's going to hurt a lot more than not fighting it. And I think that's when you know you got something good. Like Bitcoin, my new way of pitching Bitcoin, especially when it comes from an ecological perspective, is instead of fighting, instead of being forced to with violence. So I mean, I think it's extremely interesting, and I think it's very appropriate for Bitcoiners to say, hey, JP Morgan, you don't want to add Bitcoin to your balance sheet. GM Motors, you don't want to add Bitcoin to your balance sheet. Do you just not care about your shareholders? Do you like why don't you care about, we need to start flipping the narrative to, if you are demonizing Bitcoin, maybe you're just ignorant, maybe you're just malicious, maybe you just don't care.
So this conversation is kind of forming a little bit about what Nathaniel was talking about earlier, which is something we wanted to talk about, which is this Nigerian regulation, Senate meeting that I think is just fascinating. And, sign of the times, 2020, 2021, the way that we find out about this at first is through the official Nigerian Twitter thread. And some of the quotes, I just want to peel a few quotes out of here, and then we can talk about it a little bit more directly. There's one quote that says, "The last 5 years, we have had people changing cryptocurrencies to over $500 million. It is good to ban because of the challenges it has presented. In reality, banning it doesn't take it away." There's another one that said, "Even our SEC also recognized cryptocurrency as a financial asset they need to regulate. What we should do is invite the major stakeholders to a public hearing. I am strongly against outright ban of this medium of exchange by the Central Bank of Nigeria. What the central bank should be telling Nigerians are the regulations put in place to regulate activities of the operators." There's more of these bullish things. And then this last one says, "Cryptocurrency has become a worldwide transaction of which you cannot even identify who owns what. The technology is so strong, I don't see the kind of regulation that we can do. Bitcoin has made our currency almost useless or valueless." The most surreal, holy cow, I can't believe that they're saying this on the Senate floor of Nigeria right now. So I want to throw that out there and hear people's thoughts.
The one, I have a quick thought on the one you mentioned, the last of, "I don't see what we can do." I think that part resonates with me, strikes a chord so strongly in me. I don't see what we can do. And that's really how Bitcoin changes the future, at least in my eyes. It's not that society is going to have some big collective awakening to, oh, actually, we should reorganize ourselves this way. Everybody, let's vote for it. Let's just kind of, hold hands and make it happen. It's going to be that the people who have determined the way that society has been organized are simply not going to be able to stop this thing, even if they want to. So it's less about what they say and what they think, and comes down to more about what they can do. And Bitcoin changes what they can do by being the best defensive technology for people to protect their wealth that we've ever had.
Hey guys, I want to jump in really quick. We are still having problems in the studio. It keeps dropping off and that's interrupting things on Twitter. I want to take a quick break, and then after that I want to jump into this BYN Melon or BNY Melon report and update. So for those watching, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back on after we restart the computer at the studio. For everyone who is actually in Zoom, nothing will change for you. So we can keep chatting.
In Twitch, we're saying that the NSA is trying to DDoS us, and honestly, I believe it.
Wait, what's that?
Well, hey, we're spreading knowledge. It's a sign of that we're putting out some good information. I know that the stream is just hyping up everywhere. So let's get this computer set on the studio side and keep the